Hello, folks. Today we're going to talk about mental health and mental distress across cultures, and we're going to incorporate pastoral counseling into this. Um, and let's just jump right in. Mental health is culturally defined. When you discuss mental health, you have to recognize that every culture defines wellness differently. It's very important. In many Western societies, mental health is more often than not, connected to independence. It's connected to self confidence, emotional expression, uh, personal achievement. These are kind of goals, right? And you're considered emotionally healthy if you're functioning independently and managing overall life effectively. Now, we're not discounting emotional upheaval here, okay? Not all cultures prioritize individuality. We have individualistic cultures and collectivist cultures. Uh, I'm sure you're familiar with that. Individualistic, it's all about me, not in a bad way always. And collectivist, it's all about me doing good for everybody else. Everybody benefits. So in a collectivist culture, wellness is pretty frequently measured by harmony within the family or within the community. And somebody might feel emotionally healthy because relationships are stable. Family obligations are being taken care of. Social peace is maintained. Everything's running smoothly. In some indigenous traditions, wellness includes a balance between physical, emotional, spiritual, and natural worlds. I don't know if you have friends that are Native American. I do and have had. And um, I had a very, very close friend that grew up on an Apache reservation, and his view of the world was totally different from mine, being raised in a stereotypical Western culture. So, and with that in consideration, mental health is not separated from spirituality um, or community life. Him living on a reservation, I mean, that's an isolated situation. So, as a pastoral counselor, what is it that you have to avoid? You got to avoid assuming that everyone shares the same understanding of emotional wellness. You got to ask questions, and the question should be like, "What does wellness mean to you?" That's kind of an obvious, right? How does your family define emotional health? What role does spirituality play uh, related to feeling emotionally balanced? These questions would allow you to understand the person's functioning within their culture and what their spiritual context is. Don't try to impose your own framework of those understandings on a person that's from a different culture. You're setting yourself up for failure. And mental distress, that's different across cultures. An important reality in multicultural counseling is that distress is not always verbally expressed. It's not always verbally expressed as several things: sadness, anxiety, depression. Many cultures, emotional suffering is really communicated through physical symptoms. And how does that work? Well, they may report headaches, fatigue, stomach pain, chest pressure, body aches, instead of saying they're emotionally overwhelmed. I think it's one of the Asian cultures talks about fullness of head. I'm not too sure that you can actually translate that into Western culture. I believe the closest we could come to defining that for us in a Western culture would be uh, uh, emotionally overwhelmed. Some people say stressed out or uh, emo- overload. Those kind of thoughts. cognitive overload. That really doesn't. It can happen, but it's not what you think it is. So, what are we calling these? We're calling these somatic expressions of distress. A person experiencing grief or depression, for example, may repeatedly seek medical care for physical discomfort, uh, not understanding that the discomfort is related to emotion. So, you don't need a pill, you need a counselor. Um, how do we determine that? Well, ask questions again. We always ask questions. I think you're getting that. You listen carefully to what they're saying. You listen for emotional meaning behind physical complaints. Don't minimize these things or assume that the person is exaggerating. Look, you've been around enough people to know when somebody's hurting, it can have psychosomatic effects. So what would you do? I'd ask them this: when did these symptoms begin? What was happening in your life at that time? Has stress affected your body? I have a close relative, I'll leave it at that, who easily stresses. Things overwhelm that family member easily. And they developed one day a rapid heartbeat, 260 beats a minute. They thought they were dying. It was taken care of through medication quickly at the ER, but uh, this can happen. That is an extreme psychosomatic reaction. What are you doing when you're asking those questions? You're connecting emotional and spiritual experiences with physical suffering. It's a real thing, folks. Cultural interpretations of mental illness um, can be difficult. People interpret mental distress through their different cultural and spiritual lenses. So, some individuals understand emotional struggles biologically. They might believe depression or anxiety is caused by genetics or brain chemistry or trauma. You can't rule those out. Others might interpret it as spiritual suffering. They might believe their distress comes from spiritual attack. We talked about this already last week, I think. Sin, loss of faith, demonic oppression, or spiritual imbalance. Do we rule those out? No. Um, some people interpret it socially. They see emotional pain as connected to, and don't rule these out either, racism, poverty, injustice, family conflict, community instability. Uh, we're trying to reach the whole universe here. So, what do you do as a pastoral counselor? You got to understand their interpretation because that's who you're dealing with, them, not you. Uh, Understand their interpretation before you offer any kind of guidance. If you dismiss their worldview off the top, you're going to destroy any trust that might need to be or that needs to be developed. You've got to gain their trust. You're not going to get anywhere with somebody that doesn't trust you. That's going to be a one and done deal for you. If someone believes, for example, spiritual warfare contributes to their suffering, we don't have to mock it. We don't want to mock it. We don't want to reject it. You have to understand that that's their belief system. You respectfully explore how spiritual concerns and emotional health interact in their world. You don't want to argue with the person's worldview, but you do want to provide compassionate and responsible care. So you're going to sit down and speak with them about what their background is, what led them to get here. And that's the next thing I want to talk about, historical and intergenerational trauma. Trauma doesn't only affect individuals, it can affect an entire community, and it can do that across generations. Let me give you some examples: slavery, colonization. You can think of the people we're talking about, war, My gosh, that's everybody. Forced migration. Cherokees come to mind. Racism, genocide, Jewish people, among others, and religious persecution. We're very fortunate in our country. There's Indonesia and some places like that. Uh, there's African nations, one or two over there that not too long ago were executing people for their Christian beliefs. That's real, folks. What do these things do? They shape family systems, they shape community trust, they shape emotional expression, they shape identity. Identity is a powerful thing. There are many theorists, Eric Erickson among them, that discuss identity. You don't have an identity by the time you're an adolescent, you got a problem. You don't know who you are. This can follow you all your life. People that job hunt, skip from job to job to job, or join this club or that cult, or whatever the case is, looking for identity. It's a dangerous thing for some people. Communities, as an example, that are exposed to repeated injustice develop chronic fear. They develop distrust. They develop hypervigilance. And families pass that along. It's a survival behavior. One generation to the next has given this information. The original trauma occurred decades ago, but it's as fresh as if it just happened. You have to understand, as a pastoral counselor, that emotional suffering is sometimes connected to collective history rather than personal weakness. And let me stop here a second. One of the stigmas of seeking out mental health care is this business of personal weakness. It'd be like me accusing you, okay, you missed last week's lecture because you had the flu. What's the matter with you? You couldn't not get the flu? Come on, give me a break. You just need to try harder. Um, that's attacking a person in terms of accusing them of being weak. If you say, "Why are you going to get mental health care? You can't handle this. You just need a swift kick in the whatever, and buck up, friend. Get it together. Stiff upper lip, whatever the case is." All those things still exist in other cultures, sometimes more so than Western culture. When you try to understand them as a pastoral counselor and offer that, then what are you doing? You're strengthening empathy, and you're not oversimplifying mental distress in their view. You take it seriously. You don't glad hand, but you take it seriously. Yeah, let's get to the bottom of this. Let's talk a little bit more about stigma. One of the greatest barriers to mental health care across all cultures. I had a student come to me one time. I'm not going to tell you what school, and her mom is a psychologist. She's from a Latino culture and Hispanic culture, and her words, not mine, and her very words, "I'm Latino." That's what she said, and I'm depressed. And I asked her, why? Because of your culture? No, because my mother is a psychologist, and I went to her um, and told her I was depressed, and when I was still in my country, and she said, "Please don't tell anybody. We don't want anybody to know," because of the stigma. True story. She asked me for counseling. Well, can't really do that as her professor. I could give her some guidelines, but conflict of interest things, etc. I'd be glad to talk to anybody about it, but I can't out and out counsel. Because of stigmas like that, it's very troublesome. Troublesome. People will hide symptoms. They will avoid counseling. They'll refuse medication if it's called for. Counselors don't medicate, we refer. and then refer winds up with a medically trained person who can offer medication. Or they will isolate themselves emotionally. Withdrawal, which only exacerbates the problem, by the way. Some may only seek help from clergy because they think pastoral care feels safer than professional mental health treatment. Uh, depends on the level of training. What we can do is remind them of this: emotional pain doesn't mean spiritual failure. Emotional pain doesn't mean you're weak. Seeking help's not weakness. Seeking help is wise. Uh, mental health struggles can affect even people of faith. They were not immune. So we need to work against this stigma. Leads me to another thought: harmful spiritual responses. Some religious responses to mental health illnesses can unintentionally cause harm. You know what causes that? This thing right here under your nose called your mouth. Without engaging this first, it's called your brain. If you say something like, you just need more faith, pray harder. You've heard these things before in last lecture. Real Christians should not feel depressed. Really? If you say those things, that probably is going to increase shame. It even interject guilt. They may be thinking these thoughts: God is angry with me. My faith is defective. You ever heard somebody say, I'm not real sure I'm saved. I feel like I've left something undone. Or they think they are spiritually failing. Oh my gosh. This guy cut me off in traffic and I called him a name, a horrible name that I hate this. Those kind of thoughts, y'all. Pastoral counselors have to avoid simplistic spiritual explanations for complex emotional struggles. That's why we have pastoral counseling, the science. Again, you've heard me say this. I hate the word, but if it's used properly with um, uh, God in charge, then it's okay. Not dependent on what's going on related to science, dependent on what's going on related to God. God gave us science, by the way. So don't be simplistic with the spiritual explanation, because these things that you're dealing with are very complex. Faith can support healing, absolutely. But spiritual care shouldn't replace wisdom, shouldn't replace compassion or appropriate treatment. Telling somebody to pray harder when they need some help with um, major depressive disorder can get you in a lot of trouble. What do you want to do? What attitude do you want to have? What do you want to say to them? Your suffering matters. You're not alone. God's care can work alongside counseling and treatment, making sure they know God's first. And it's okay to seek support. What would you do if you had a bad cold and you couldn't shake it? You go to the doctor. Well, why not go to see a healthcare professional? In our case, a pastoral counselor. Good approaches offer hope without any shame. Let's discuss spirituality and mental health. We've kind of been dancing around that a little bit. Spirituality most frequently, or I should say very frequently, not all the time, plays a powerful role in emotional resilience and healing, but not for everybody. Spiritual practices, what can they do? They can provide meaning, they can provide hope, uh, comfort, identity, community support. What identity? What do I mean by identity? I'm a Christian. Sometimes that has to be reinforced. We all get up every day knowing that. Those of us that are saved, I'm not saying I'm not saying anybody in this group isn't. Uh, I don't know. I would assume you are. Hope you are. Prayer, worship, meditation, scripture reading, supportive faith communities. These things help individuals cope with stuff. Grief, anxiety, trauma. If anybody in this class aspires to being a chaplain, I'm a chaplain. Works very well hand in hand with pastoral counseling in certain circumstances, absolutely with trauma and absolutely with grief, somewhat in anxiety, depending on the anxiety source. A lot of people survive difficult experience because faith gives them strength. It also gives them purpose. But as a pastoral counselor, you have to recognize that spirituality is deeply personal. Two people may belong to the same faith tradition, but experience spirituality very differently. This is the question and answer stuff. How do you feel about this, that, or the other? Tell me about your faith. Tell me about your spirituality experience. What do you do as a counselor? I want to explore how the person understands God, how faith affects their emotional life, whether spirituality currently brings comfort or distress. It's a potential. Those kind of conversations can help you provide spiritually sensitive care, which is what we're all about. There's some negatives. Negative religious coping. Not all religious experiences are emotionally healthy. Spiritual abuse, manipulation, fear-based preaching, excessive guilt, religious shame. I'm not going to break these down because I feel like most of you would understand. I once went to a church and quit going to it because every Sunday that I went, I was told over and over what a piece of trash I was. Not me individually, the whole church. You guys are nothing but garbage. Da 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 da. Here's how you fix it. And it just was over, and I quit going. I got tired of being talked to negatively. What happens in the case happened to me. Instead of gaining comfort or uplifting, I associated it with emotional distress. Why am I such a bad person? uh, some people even become fearful. If you're raised in a highly condemning environment and you've developed chronic anxiety about punishment, that could include a fear of punishment or rejection of you by God. So we have to be careful with what we're dealing with here and understanding where they're coming from. Other people may have experienced abuse within a religious community and they struggle with trust, they struggle with identity, they struggle with spiritual confusion. How confusing would that be when you've been taught by uh, preachers, pastors, ministers, whatever category you want to call them, uh, that we need to trust and love one another, and then somebody violates that. You have to take those experiences very seriously. Should never dismiss spiritual trauma just because it occurred in a religious setting. We need to create safe environments where people can discuss that stuff, discuss painful spiritual experiences, and be honest. How did it make you feel? I don't, I know how you feel. No, no, no. How did it make you feel? So let's look at some healing practices. Yes, this is the gist of it all. Different cultures approach this in different ways. What? Approach what? Healing. Some communities rely heavily on things like prayer rituals, elders, traditional healers, herbal medicine, storytelling, music, fasting, communal ceremonies. Just depends on what your cultural background is religiously. You shouldn't dismiss anything right away that differs from our own traditions. We should ask questions. You're going to hear that a million times. What healing practices are important in your culture? Who do people trust during difficult times in your culture? What spiritual practices bring comfort to your family? It helps you to understand the client's support system, and you can incorporate this into whatever you're trying to do for them, whatever approach you're taking. This is called actually respectful curiosity. And if you do that and you do it sincerely, it's going to build trust and it's going to strengthen the counseling relationship, because that's what we're dealing with here. We are establishing a relationship. You're in this together. I'm not the healer. We are the healer. Ultimately, of course, God is. Brings us to a tough point: communication. Whew. Communications vary across cultures. Let me say it again. Communications vary significantly across cultures. Some individuals communicate emotions directly and openly, and others don't. They do it through indirect things like stories, even silence. Silence may carry different meanings: respect, grief, reflection, discomfort, even emotional control. Emotional expression differs culturally. Some cultures value emotional restraint and calmness, while others encourage expressive communication. It just depends on how you're raised, how you're brought up. We as counselors have to avoid misinterpreting communication. Uh, we don't want to classify it as pathology. There's that word again, diseased. Diseased communication. Sounds weird, doesn't it? It's not. A quiet person, for example, is not necessarily emotionally detached. An expressive person is not automatically unstable. Introversion, extroversion, give you that example. An introverted person doesn't mean that they're antisocial. It could mean that they're very analytical. You've known people like that. They just don't have a lot to say, but when they do say something, everybody's ears perk up. And then a person that's quiet, that's an introverted person. An extroverted person, expressively engaged, that doesn't mean they're boisterous and loudmouths. An expressive person can simply be somebody that likes to share. I'm sometimes accused of that by my wife. Her answer to that is, please be quiet, I'm reading. Cultural humility, another difficult area. Humility is more than just learning facts of different cultures. It's an attitude of openness. It's an attitude of respect. It's lifelong learning. No counselor becomes an expert in every culture. Uh, we remain teachable and willing to listen. Cultural humility basically means asking rather than assuming, a biggie, listening rather than stereotyping, respecting an individual's lived experience. You don't know much about their lived experience till you ask them. You need to ask yourself some questions. Am I making assumptions? Am I listening carefully? They're talking to you and you're staring out the window thinking about going and flying an airplane this afternoon, like I did this morning. Am I imposing my worldview on this person? What does humility do? It strengthens trust and it creates safer counseling relationships. Do you see that as a redundancy? I do. I'm sure you do too. So we need to be self aware. Every counselor brings personal beliefs and experiences into the counseling relationship. That's period. You've got your built in presuppositions, right? Toss them out the window. At least put them off to the side. Your theology, your personal upbringing, your personal culture, your family background, your education will all influence how you interpret a person's behavior and how you interpret their suffering. So, without any self awareness, counselors they're going to lose. You're going to lose in this session. You may unintentionally judge a client. And the problem is you're not looking through a non-biased lens. If an example, okay, if you value emotional openness, you may misunderstand someone who's emotionally reserved. You may think that they're even ignoring you. Or if you have strong theological assumptions, you may unintentionally dismiss different spiritual perspectives. Again, ask questions. Don't assume. If you're being self aware, then that allows you to recognize personal biases and remain compassionate, remain ethical, remain respectable, or become those. So, healthy counseling begins with an understanding of the client and who else? You. What are some really good practices then? We're wrapping this up. You're probably going, yay, it's about time. Here's a statement. Effective multicultural pastoral counseling requires both spiritual sensitivity and psychological wisdom. That's a mouthful, isn't it? Let's break it down. Active listening. Pay attention. Empathy. The argument, empathy versus sympathy. Don't worry about that. Empathy means I've been through it, so I know what you're going through. Again, I will reiterate the thousandth time. Don't say, I know how you feel, but I know what you're going through. That's okay if you qualify it. I know what you're going through because I've been through it, but I don't know how it's making you feel. That's what I'm here for, is to listen to you tell me that. Respect their cultural identity. Be aware of stigma. Be spiritually sensitive. And work in collaboration with other mental health care professionals. Don't be a hero. I mentioned airplanes a while ago. I fly airplanes. We have this thing we call a go around. The hardest part of flying an airplane is making it land, because they, regardless of what you think, they don't like to land. They like to fly. So you got to coax it to land. Well, too much or not enough coaxing gets you in trouble. And there's this thing, this go around. What does that mean? That means I blew the landing. I better give this thing full throttle and pull back a little bit on the yoke, raise my nose, and gain some airspeed and go around in the pattern and come back and try it again. Pilots, some, I don't, pilots have big egos. They don't like to admit failure. So going around is something that you have to overcome your ego sometimes to make happen. Uh, Let me tell you what the end result might be. They'll be at your funeral because you flew your airplane into the ground. Well, counselors sometimes get a little bit of a I can do this attitude, right? And they won't refer or they won't collaborate. It's almost like they're admitting lack of ability. Don't do that. Who are you harming? You're harming somebody that needs help. So there you go. That's your first flight lesson. That'll be $65, please. Thank you. Pastoral counselors know when to refer. They should know, and refer when it's necessary. Don't attempt to treat something that's severe that you're not trained to handle. It's beyond your competence. But at the same time, utilize your strengths: spiritual care, emotional support, community connection, compassionate presence. Excuse me. These are things that you hopefully possess to a degree, and use those. But go around when necessary. How's that sound? The goal is holistic care. We want to honor emotional, cultural, relational, and spiritual dimensions of a person. We want to take all these into account. When you approach a client with humility, compassion, cultural understanding, at least making an attempt, they're going to know that you don't know their culture absolutely. And you want to present yourself to cause a healing relationship to form, then you're going to be successful at what you're doing most of the time. All right. Good day. I'll see you again.